Hello, this is Garrett Philbrook. I'm here with Joe Powell, Joshua Goley, and JD Mauricio. Our topic today is enterprise cyber risk management for Joe's company, Fidelity National Financial Inc. Our risk problem today in our background, how to organize manage cyber risks to their enterprise. Cyber risks being up and coming, developing risks, very diverse, a lot of things to look out for. We'll look at managing cyber risks by transferring enterprise risks via cyber insurance from a risk transfer perspective as opposed to avoidance or mitigation opportunities, and highlighting FNF to illustrate managing risks through cyber insurance, and we'll use industry data and historical internal data to choose coverage for kind of a model insurance portfolio program.
And then we'll look at Fidelity National Financial, FNF. It's a large publicly traded company, number 402 on the Fortune 500 list. All the things that we're sharing with you on this slide are publicly available, but it's the largest title insurance company in America, and therefore has the most transactions sifting through it with the most private information and data that needs to be secured. And so that's why we're looking at it for its cyber risks and cyber insurance considerations. The company has a lot of history, a lot of experience in preserving data through, natural disasters. But now the trend is turning towards cyber risk and digital information, and so that's why the emphasis now is on cyber security. We will look next at this snapshot of the company that just gives you a brief idea about the amount of money that's at stake and the number of transactions that they're involved in, as well as the regulation of FNF by all the various governmental actors like the Securities and Exchange Commission and the various departments of insurance across the country, and then looking at all the consumer privacy laws that are out there. We'll next look at the publicly filed 10K statement of FNF that they use each year on their form that's filed with the SEC. This is the most recent one from 2018, and we'll see the statements that they've listed and emphasized on here. The first being that they're saying to their investors and to the government that if their information security systems fail, that's a bad thing. It will damage their reputation and their ability to conduct business effectively. They're also saying that if their computer systems get hacked, that it's going to be a significant problem for the security of the company. Another important statement that they make is that with these breaches, if they occur, or that the public or customers think that they might occur, it will severely impact the company with financial losses, lawsuits, bad publicity, and generally adverse consequences to the business. And then, of course, they recognize that all these things would subject them to governmental fines and breaches of contract, that sort of thing. So they're making these statements very plain and clear up front that these are risks of such a big company that's such a big collector of data. And they're making that to the SEC. The company has an enterprise risk management program that they have developed and keep it in writing through the board of directors, which has to take the leadership in this, running it through their audit committee. And then they have the enterprise risk steering committee, which is made up of managers throughout the company. And then the chief risk officer implements that as well. But there's offices all over the country, which means there's more and more opportunities for cyber incidents to occur through human errors, mistakes that might be made, and so forth. So what Fidelity has to determine is how much of that risk do they want to keep and how much do they want to transfer to someone else through cyber risk insurance. All right. I look at the cyber risk program profile currently, or a before and after type situation. Let's say right now Fidelity has a $10 million limit on their cyber risk insurance coverage with a $500,000 deductible. And that coverage does not include social engineering or dependent business interruption. And so Fidelity has to determine, is that something we want to increase? What do we want to change about that in transferring the risk? And they categorize those risks levels as high, considerable, moderate, limited, or low. And do they have enough insurance in place? And do they need to buy more? All right, Garrett will take over and introduce you to the next topic.
All right, so the types of data that we use in the validation for this project, a lot of it pulls and aggregates data from various government agencies, the FBI, et cetera, various state regulators. Almost every state's attorney general has enforcement powers for various data breach notification requirements and so forth. Various industry surveys, reports, papers, and research out there, and tools and calculators that we had, both professionally via subscription services and just public information. Sources are all included. And then, of course, internal organization data from historical claims of our company, like actual claims, premiums that we made up, and actual premiums aggregated for our industry class, and then, of course, losses for our industry peer group. The next slide here, slide 10, is the data breach cost calculator. Basically, this is taking just a sample example of a data breach and all the various costs associated with it. I think we assumed around 5 million records were breached. For a company of this size, that's with as many records as we have at FNF, that's not out of the ordinary. You'll see here that incident investigation is a pretty high percentage here. Forensics investigations, security remediation, and the breach coach, the attorney to walk you through the process, adds up. You have to notify all the individuals on the next part. You have to have call center expenses, credit monitoring, public relations, class action lawsuit in this example. You have defense, e-discovery, settlements, and then PCI being like payment card industry, fines and penalties and so forth for debit, credit cards, things like that. And of course, your regulatory fines and penalties add up. State attorneys generals, health and human services for health records and things of that nature. You can see it's pretty substantial cost here for this example, $32 million. Next slide. This shows kind of a limit adequacy for our industry peer group of finance and insurance of 1 billion or greater revenues. You'll see the black line there is the median peer group, the loss amounts. We'll click through here to some key data. Median limit of 20 million for our peer group would cover 86% of settlements based on historical loss performance of our peer group. So the next slide here shows our peer group again, and the red arrows pointing down reflect where FNF stands. So premium distribution, you'll see that we're in the 150 to 250K range in our peer group, kind of in the middle. But on the limit perspective, you'll see that we're 10 to 20 million, which is again sort of in the middle, but from 1 billion or greater, we're definitely on the greater of the scale. I think we're 12 billion or more in revenues, if I recall correctly. Retention, that's kind of our retained risk, what we will pay out before the insurance pays. We're at 500,000 to 750,000. Right there, you'll see the actual numbers that we've made up for this example on the bottom right quadrant. The next slide shows the number of incidents historically for our peer group for breaches. You'll see the blue is the average and the orange is FNF, actual history. First column is the past 3 years, second column is past 5 years, the third column is past 10 years, you'll see that in the first column, we have a little bit better than average experience there for number of incidents compared to our peer group, and it's trending downward over the past 5 to 10 years, which is good. Next slide, we're going to pass it on to Joshua on slide 15.
All right, so what we have here is our peer group about the incidents of cyber breaches and the type of the breach. And you'll see data privacy as a leading incident type. This one actually shows the severity of record count loss by type of data being PFI and PII records that have been lost or compromised resulting from the breaches on the previous slide. This slide shows a number of incidents and records of data privacy and shows where FNF stands concerning industry average related to our peer groups. As previously discussed, FNF does not have social engineering coverage. However, the data shows this is an emerging cyber risk. Social engineering claims are common amongst large companies. However, the average loss of these breaches is not terribly high, as you can see here. There are a larger number of claims, but the overall payout is not large. Phishing, spoofing, and social engineering causes of loss. There's no verification or a callback policy for funds transfers. There is a lack of training for employees. When it comes to mobile devices, laptops, our policies are subpar. There's no consistency amongst encryption of devices. No portable media restriction, USB drives, and the like, and there's no restriction or tracking on external cloud systems. Next slide, I'm going to turn it over to JD.
Now that we've seen the types of data breaches FNF has experienced, along with its peers in the financial and insurance industry, we'll look at some of the controls these players have. According to a survey conducted by Ponemon, 70% of respondents regularly review physical security and access to confidential information. The number 2 response shows that these organizations deal with conducting background checks on new full-time employees and vendors. And another thing of note is that half of the respondents perform a third-party cybersecurity assessment. So there's plenty of room for the controls within these organizations to improve. As you can see, the red circles show that the average time it takes for an organization to discover a breach increases each year. This is a particularly dangerous risk with the presence of advanced persistent threats. These bad actors can linger within an organization's systems and networks undetected, collecting valuable information ranging from intellectual property to privacy data. As it stands, claims analysis won't change based on days till discovery, but without adequate coverage, FNF is looking at greater uninsured losses because of the longer detection times. Additionally, as the detection times increase and impact to losses increase, you may see more insurers attempt to deny claims if the delays resulted from negligence on the part of the insured. Here's a list of different cyber insurance coverage options ranging from liability, first-party losses, cyber crimes, other miscellaneous cyber incidents. The first issue of note is that many of these losses could be impacted by lost or stolen laptops and mobile devices, especially if there's insufficient security controls. The second issue of note is that as cyber insurance industry matures, we are seeing it adapt to current issues. What may have been excluded 5 to 10 years ago now has available coverage options. It is up to each organization to choose which risks it wants to transfer. One issue, which is not adequately covered by FNF in our scenario, is business interruptions and social engineering attacks. Obtaining coverage in these areas will transfer much of the organization's cyber risks as we see an increase in these types of attacks. To combat social engineering attacks, FNF should implement verification procedures prior to funds transfer, to limit losses from lost or stolen devices, to implement a robust social engineering and phishing awareness program across the enterprise, and restrict bring your own device access and USB drives. 2 ways FNF can manage cyber risks are transferring risks through cyber insurance and mitigating cyber risks by implementing security controls. After looking at the data of its peers in the financial industry, FNF can see where its current cyber insurance coverage compares to others. Next, FNF can look at its own historic data of losses and claims to determine that it needs to increase its limits to 50 million, to increase its retention to $1 million, which will result in lower annual premiums. At the end of the process, the goal is to move the enterprise's risk exposure to within the risk appetite of the organization, which is how FNF and other similar organizations can transfer their risks through the cyber insurance.
Thank you for joining us for this presentation about cyber risk insurance and the enterprise risk management policies of FNF and the decisions that they make relative to that. Gig 'em.